It started with a single question that cut through the chamber like a blade. On live television, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and asked, "Justice Thomas, can you explain why records show you received undisclosed luxury trips funded by billionaire donors with active cases before this court?" The room froze. For a moment, the air seemed to collapse under the weight of her words. Supporters of Thomas shifted uncomfortably, while reporters scrambled to capture every syllable. Crockett didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her tone was steady, deliberate, and laced with certainty. She was not fishing for answers. She was setting a trap. Every eye turned to the judge, who had built a decades-long career on silence and restraint, watching to see if the immovable figure of the Supreme Court would finally crack. The camera zoomed in as Thomas cleared his throat. For years, he had ignored critics, dismissed accusations, and let allies defend him. But this time was different. The evidence Crockett referenced wasn't rumor. It wasn't speculation. It was already on the record, tied to receipts, flight manifests, and financial disclosures. The mere mention of it live, before the nation, made denial almost impossible. The crowd of journalists gasped as Crockett pressed harder. These were not private vacations. They were gifts with strings attached. Do you deny that billionaires seeking influence over this court paid for your lifestyle while you sat in judgment over their interests? Thomas shifted in his seat. His face, usually unreadable, carried a flicker of strain. The words that followed would set the stage for a political earthquake. For decades, Clarence Thomas had stood as one of the most immovable pillars of the Supreme Court. To his supporters, he was the embodiment of conservative strength, a justice who weathered storms and never wavered under pressure. To his critics, he was the symbol of secrecy and silence, a man who rarely spoke in hearings yet wielded immense power behind closed doors. He had survived scandals before, and many believed he would survive them all. But Jasmine Crockett was not like the others. Known for her sharp tongue and fearless confrontations, she entered the chamber determined to make the untouchable touchable. She was not intimidated by titles or robes. She saw herself as the voice of accountability in a system designed to protect the powerful. And in this moment, her target was not just Clarence Thomas, but the shadowy network of billionaires and political operatives who had shielded him for years. Around her, the tension was palpable. Members of Congress bowed in uneasy silence, unsure of whether to intervene or let the spectacle unfold. Reporters hunched over laptops, every keystroke amplifying the drama for the watching world. On social media, the clips were already going viral. Within minutes, hashtags linking Thomas to bribery were climbing to the top of trending lists. What made the confrontation explosive was not simply the allegation itself, but the fact that it came with receipts, names, dates, transactions, and trips, all meticulously documented and ready to be laid bare. The stakes had never been higher because this was no longer about whispers or innuendo. It was about proof. Crockett leaned back slightly, letting the weight of her accusation linger. She knew she had the nation's full attention, and she was ready to push further, even if it meant dismantling the myth of judicial untouchability right there on live television. Justice Thomas shifted uneasily, his fingers pressing against the armrest of his chair. His voice, when it finally emerged, was low and deliberate. "Congresswoman, I have always complied with the law. Any suggestion otherwise is an attack not just on me, but on the institution I serve." Crockett did not flinch. "The institution you serve is the American people, not billionaire patrons," she fired back. "And the documents show something very different. Charter flight invoices, five-star resorts, private yacht excursions, all paid for by individuals with direct interests before this court. How do you explain that?" The room buzzed. Reporters whispered furiously. Thomas exhaled slowly. "I did not believe those gifts required disclosure," he said. "They were gestures of friendship." "Friendship?" Crockett's tone sharpened like a blade. "Friendship doesn't come with legal cases pending. Friendship doesn't come in the form of luxury trips worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Friendship doesn't come with lobbyists whispering in your ear. This isn't friendship, Justice Thomas. This is bribery dressed up as generosity." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The word bribery hung heavy, impossible to ignore. Thomas bristled, his composure slipping. "You are mischaracterizing the facts," he said, his voice rising. "I have served honorably for decades. Honor is not for sale," Crockett interrupted, her words cutting across his protest. "You may have convinced yourself that silence would protect you, but silence will not save you here. Not when the truth is staring this country in the face." Across the nation, televisions replayed the moment on loop. Clips of Crockett's relentless questioning exploded across social media platforms. Hashtags like #bribery links and #ThomasExposed dominated the conversation. Opinion shows scrambled to book guests, while legal analysts debated whether this was merely an ethical scandal or the start of something far more devastating. And still, Crockett pressed forward. Each question, each pointed remark dug deeper into the fortress Clarence Thomas had built around himself. And with every answer he gave, the cracks in that fortress widened. The tension in the chamber had reached a breaking point. Every exchange left Clarence Thomas more visibly strained, his voice heavier, his words less convincing. Then Jasmine Crockett leaned forward once more, her eyes fixed directly on him. "Justice Thomas," she said slowly, "I want you to listen carefully to this." She lifted a folder, sliding out a printed document that reporters instantly recognized as a leaked email. "This is correspondence between one of your billionaire benefactors and their legal team. In it, they state, word for word, Justice Thomas is aware of the support, and it will be remembered when our case reaches the court." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, and frantic typing filled the air. Thomas froze. His hands tightened around the edge of his desk. For a man who had spent a lifetime avoiding direct confrontation, the words hit like a hammer. Crockett pressed on, her voice sharp, unwavering. "Do you deny that this email exists? Do you deny that these words were written? Or will you continue to pretend that luxury yachts and private jets are just the kindness of casual friends?" Thomas opened his mouth, but no sound came. The silence was louder than any denial. Cameras zoomed in, catching the moment his lips trembled and his composure cracked. "This isn't rumor. This isn't innuendo. This is a smoking gun," Crockett declared. "The American people deserve to know if a Supreme Court justice has been bought and sold like a commodity." The crowd inside the chamber broke into chaos. Some lawmakers pounded the table in outrage, others shouted for order, while reporters rushed to blast headlines across the world. "Crockett drops bombshell email linking Thomas to bribery." For the first time in his career, Clarence Thomas looked cornered. His silence, his hesitation, his inability to mount a convincing defense, all of it played out live in real time for millions to witness. And in that silence, his image as untouchable began to collapse. The chamber was in chaos, but Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She simply let the evidence hang in the air, unchallenged, undeniable. Then she delivered her closing words with the precision of a final blow. "No one," she said firmly, "is above accountability. Not a senator, not a president, and not even a justice of the Supreme Court. The robes you wear do not shield you from the truth. And the truth is clear. Justice cannot be bought." The silence that followed was deafening. Clarence Thomas sat motionless, his head lowered, his authority diminished in a way that words could not fully capture. For decades, he had endured criticism and survived scandals, but this moment was different. This was not speculation whispered in the margins. This was evidence read aloud in front of the nation. News outlets exploded with breaking coverage. "Thomas shatters under pressure" flashed across cable tickers. Social media boiled over, with millions replaying Crockett's decisive lines. Hashtags surged. "Justice for sale," #Crockett exposes, #court in crisis. Late-night hosts, talk radio, and podcasts all seized on the spectacle, debating what it meant for the legitimacy of the highest court in the land. For Thomas's defenders, the spectacle was an outrage, an ambush meant to humiliate a man who had dedicated his life to the judiciary. But for many Americans, the moment was overdue, a reckoning for an institution that had too often placed itself beyond scrutiny. Crockett's words reverberated long after the hearing ended. Her message was not just about one man, it was about a principle, a reminder that democracy cannot survive if justice is for sale. that even the most powerful must face the same light of truth as everyone else. And as Clarence Thomas walked out of that chamber, his silence spoke louder than any denial. The myth of untouchability was broken. The nation had seen him falter, and the question that lingered was no longer whether he would recover, but whether the Supreme Court itself could withstand the shadow now cast upon it.